This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the backs there are. He backs it. He kicks it. Oh, the fall from Dersma. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing. He keeps going. 4 bounces. Join in the chorus. The can't lose Kangas. AFLW premiers.
Hello, welcome back once again to North Pod. And whilst it was not a win against the Saints, certainly a better performance than last week against the Cats, we needed a response. We definitely got a response of sorts. Could have been better. Definitely a lot of room for improvement in this performance, but you can't argue with the fact that we were in the game with a minute to go. More competitive, still a very error-prone game, but holistically performed in an improved performance, is what I'm trying to say there. Probably more reminiscent of our mid-season games where we competed, but we just weren't quite able to get across the line. A bit unsure how to win in those clutch moments, and Lord knows we had several of those in that middle part of the year before we were able to break through for those couple of wins. So look, we'll unpack the game against the Saints. Still plenty to work on, absolutely, but I think what all North fans just wanted some kind of response. And I think, whilst you can be unhappy with a lot of things in this game, the fact that we were competitive within the game, I think, is probably the most important thing. The most important thing coming out of last week, and we did achieve that. So, yeah, let's jump in. Lots to talk about. Usual stuff. Let's jump right in. Review, and we always start with team selection, and 3 changes for this game. 1 forced and 2 unforced changes. So Jai Simpkin, a bit of an injury, so he was an omission as a result of that, but the other 2 coming out, Finbar Maley and Will Dawson, were omissions. So 2 talls coming out, just the 1 tall coming in, so we do go into this game a little bit shorter. I think Finbar Maley kind of makes sense. Just structurally, it didn't make sense for him to be playing with this group. But Will Dawson's, I think, a little unlucky. I understand with Chom going back into defence, that's the reason for it. But personally, I would have preferred Griffin Logue to come out of the side and leave Will Dawson. I just think it's so valuable for him to get some experience into him right now. I thought absolutely last week he was torched, no question about it. But I think he deserved the chance to have a response to that, I suppose. He's a young, developing player. We've got to get time into him. And Griffin Logue really hasn't been anywhere near it this year. So, look, I thought of the omissions, like Maley makes sense to me. I think he's still got, plenty to give. But Will Dawson, I thought, was pretty unlucky. In any case, Nick Larkey came back in. And then George Wardlaw as the midfielder replaced Simpkin. Cooper Harvey comes in, I guess, so to speak, as that replacement for Finbar Maley. Obviously, not a like for like there, but Cooper Harvey was, he was sick last week, so he retains his spot on the side. And then Robert Hansen Jr., the substitute again. Been substitute a lot, Robert Hansen Jr. It'd be interesting to know if there's a bit of a reason as to why we like him as the sub. I understand he's a bit of a fast, quick, explosive player, but he's also not the sort of player that can, grab the game by the scruff of the neck. Anyway, he was a substitute. That's how he went in. Chom went back, as I mentioned before, with Nick Larkey coming back into the side, and I think structurally that probably suits the side a bit better at this stage. Chom certainly looks a lot more confident and comfortable in that back line. And then the game result ended up being St Kilda 11-12-78 defeated North Melbourne 10-9-69. The Saints did kick a goal after siren, which was from a bit of a questionable free kick / 50-metre penalty. So really, it was a 3-point margin, to be honest. I think that adequately reflects, how the game was going in the last quarter. I think, whilst we didn't have that one shot to win it, we certainly, I don't think, deserved to concede that late goal. So anyway, 9-point losers we were. Let's go through the game. I just mentioned that Charlie Comben was looking more assured and more at home in defence. It's not how the game started, to be clear. He was immediately giving away a free kick for contact with his eyes off the ball, running back with the flight. Just an awful one. I'll touch on that, but it was a killer free kick to give away pretty much off the jump. As I recall, we won the clearance, but then it was pretty quickly went back into St Kilda's inside 50, and that marking contest was a free kick straight away against Chom, so not the best start for him, but certainly as the game went on, I think he settled into that defensive role that he has been so effective in the last year and a half or so. I thought we were playing an uncontested marking game early and a bit of keepings off when we did have the footy. Predictably, our skills were letting us down a little bit. It was, we had a lot of nearly moments in this first quarter where we'd chain up a few possessions and then just miss a hand pass or just miss a kick that meant that chain ended up in disappointment. So, look, that was, it's an interesting change in game style from what we've been trying to do or what we've been able to do against a lot of other sides. We've seen this a couple of times where we just go for uncontested footy and it does work until it doesn't, which sounds obvious, but, we have sort of 90% of the pieces to make that work, and then, like I mentioned, someone misses a kick or a hand pass, and it falls apart from there. It didn't take me long to realise that we've got Jared Healy again, so disappointing, but, I just think it's what we're going to get from North Melbourne games at the moment. He seems to get these games that no one else wants to commentate, or special comments, I guess, is more his role, especially bad. In any case, it was a clue to me that potentially turning down the commentary might be the way to go. I thought Cam Zerha made some good early contests. He set up LDU for our first goal with a really nice kick to the pocket. LDU then played on inexplicably. I thought it was a risky move when he did, but he was able to check side it through for a goal for our first. It was, it was good. After that really shocking start from Charlie Comben, I thought we settled well into the game and were playing some good footy, and we deserved that goal from LDU. We saw plenty of the same from what we expect from North Melbourne. George Wardlaw butchers an inside 50 kick after a really nice build-up. That's killer. He really struggled, George Wardlaw, to find his feet in this game, I thought. Really didn't come good until the last quarter in terms of his ability to win the footy and also do something with it. That kick inside 50 was probably the only kick of note or disposal of note that he had in the first half. But I'll give him some slack. He's had the concussions. He's taking some time to build back into the game. Jack Darling won a really nice ruck contest inside 50 and got to Sheezel with a perfect crumbing small forward goal. That's what he was recruited for, Harry Sheezel. We know he's done a lot of different things since then, but it was nice to see him hit the scoreboard with that goal. And I thought, looking at that, we'd come to play. We were hitting the scoreboard. The Saints weren't able to get any of their slingshot stuff happening, and we were able to get the ball inside 50 and look dangerous. We had the ascendancy. There was a really nice moment where Zach Banch took a mark running back with the flight and took a really nice mark. He did collide somewhat with Burns, but not in such a way that it was, damaging either player. And it was just a bit of a story of both teams unable to finish their work in the second half of the first quarter. Some really nice build-ups, either ending in misses or just complete misses out on the full. And, I guess it's the sort of game that you'd expect from two teams towards the bottom part of the ladder. Neither team really able to have that classiness to finish or the ability to beat that last player and open up the space. Larky kicked a goal on the quarter time siren to give us a 22-8 lead at quarter time. We very rarely lead at quarter time, so it was an odd feeling going into that break with a lead, particularly given the performance we put up last week. And then, just as we're feeling good, we're feeling like we've had a successful quarter. Paul Curtis got reported for striking off the play, obviously, because the goal had already gone through, or the ball had already gone through for a goal. He got reported for striking. At the moment, as I record this, he's been offered a one-match ban. I'm not sure if North Melbourne will accept that. I think they'd be wise to. I think he's pretty lucky that it's only 1 week. Just another undisciplined play from Paul Curtis, which I'll touch on. Into the second quarter, and it was really end-to-end to start the quarter. Curtis had a really nice inboard kick. It would have been nice had he not missed it by 10 metres. The idea was nice, but the execution was missing. Then Chom wins a 2-on-1 on the wing, or St Kilda side on the wing. That was, looked like we'd won a really good contest. We go back into an inside 50 and we stuff up the transition again. It was just real end-to-end stuff in that second quarter, and neither side really able to capitalise. Tom Powell hit a really nice kick inside 50 to Nick Larkey, who took a mark and kicked a goal from that. We were creating a lot of chances, and I thought Caleb Daniel was playing a really important game behind the footy, doing one of his better games in terms of his capacity to distribute He did get caught out one-on-one defensively later on in the game, but it's kind of not on him. I thought his distribution and he's able to get meterage on the ball and chain up was really impressive, and he didn't really make too many poor decisions in this game. He certainly looked like he was indecisive a couple of times, but I don't think that was entirely on him. And then I guess after that flurry of just end-to-end stuff, the Saints really dominated territory and possession for the back half, or the last two-thirds of this second quarter. They were just getting it to Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller every time they could. It was pretty repetitive, but I thought they were doing a really good job of getting him the footy, and we weren't doing a good job of denying him the footy. Fortunately for us, they just couldn't quite get the finishing touches really on their scores. The Saints, it was a pretty shocking quarter to watch. Eventually, they did kick a couple, and they were able to get the lead late in the second quarter. Back half turnover, just for a change. Colby McKercher misses George Wardlaw, and the Saints go through the corridor. They've got a perfect shot to Ryan Marshall, who kicked a goal to put the Saints in front. Again, we saw Paul Curtis with another undisciplined act, gave away a reversal free kick, so we gave up the ball on the wing. Really costly, and I think the Saints probably played him perfectly. They got him frustrated, they got him thinking about things other than the footy, and like I said, one of them didn't result in a positive for them because it was on the quarter time siren, but another one did. So that's probably something that other teams are going to start to scout with him now, that you can frustrate him and annoy him, and it was really effective, unfortunately by the Saints, but unfortunately for us. Going into half time, I think we were still optimistic. We were definitely in the game, but the momentum had swung in that second quarter, and you got a sense and a feeling that maybe the Saints sort of had the game in their grasp, and it was going to be difficult for us to win that momentum back. I thought starting the third quarter that the movement trying to transition the footy was pretty poor. We just didn't see anything. There was nothing to kick to, and this is where we started to see Caleb Daniel looking a little bit indecisive, and McKercher the same. They just didn't have much to kick to up the ground. It was really difficult to get the ball moving, and I thought that we just weren't moving to create options for our teammates. We did see Paul Curtis injected into the midfield a little bit here. He went straight in and got a clearance out to LDU, who streamed forward and hit Cam Zurhaar deep, nearly on the goal line for a nice goal. So I think it's good that we can use Paul Curtis in that way and inject him into the midfield, particularly when he's not having a good game in the forward line or he's feeling frustrated there. That was a nice coaching move by Clarko to get him involved and get him doing something else. But we just saw so much here of the Saints wanting to give it to Wanganeen-Miller every time, and we were a bit more awake to it in the second half. I do think that there were some adjustments made at half time, and we saw players at least trying to cramp his space. He's still so good that he was able to find the footy here, and he ran away from Robert Hansen Jr. at one point. He definitely had his moments, but I think at least we were more aware of him and able to slightly nullify his impact a bit more in this third quarter. Unfortunately, Zachy Banch had to get subbed for Robert Hansen Jr. had a rib knock, so he was subbed out, I think, pretty early in the third quarter, if I recall. And just, we struggled for any kind of ascendancy and consistency in this quarter. I think it was a bit of an arm wrestle. The Saints were not kicking away, but they were just chipping away at the lead and sort of putting the game a little bit out of our reach, particularly given it was a low-scoring game. I mean, you're playing a Ross Lyon St Kilda side. It's going to be a pretty defensive game, and it certainly lived up to that billing. And then I think we saw one of Luke Parker's big moments, bit off a really long 50-metre diagonal kick into the corridor and just got us over the back. It was that perfect kick that gets over the back of the zone. We weren't completely past St Kilda's defenders, but we were past enough of them that we had the outnumbers out the back. That resulted in McKercher going on the run. It was great to see Finn O'Sullivan lay a shepherd on the play as well to make sure that McKercher had that time and space to steady for his kick. And you wondered if that was the moment that kind of swayed things back in our favour. Unfortunately, it was just that ball security. We weren't able to hold onto the footy long enough. We missed hand passes on transition. Just costly every time. You could probably pick 10 or 12 situations where we just missed a disposal just by a little bit. And particularly when you're doing that through the corridor and you turn it over in that corridor area, it's going to cost you scores. And the Saints were good enough most of the time to hurt us with those that poor disposal. Their weight of numbers in terms of going inside 50 started to have an impact here, where, sure, we were able to have some pretty quality entries when we were able to get the ball forward. Unfortunately, the Saints just had way too many, or way more than we did as a result of their capacity to lock it inside their forward half of the ground. We were able to get one over the back late, but unfortunately the siren sounded as we had an outnumber and we were sort of running into, it's nothing's a certain goal for us, but I think we had enough numbers out the back that we should have been able to walk it in for a pretty certain goal. Unfortunately, the siren beat us. We were probably about 10 seconds too late for that one. But I guess a good feeling going into three-quarter time knowing that you're creating those chances. We saw straight away LDU hit a really nice inside 50 to Jack Darling on the mark, who kicks a goal to open up the last quarter, and you wondered if that was going to be the start of something. We saw some more nice build-up, and Wardlaw were able to goal from a nice inside 50 from Colby McKercher. A nice goal from Wardlaw, given the fact that I really thought it took him some time to build into the game, and just a lot of nearly moments in this last quarter. Nick Larkey takes a mark and then's not able to take his kick, had to go off the ground for some treatment. I'm not sure if it was a knee or a lower leg injury, but he certainly looked very proppy and wasn't able to take his kick. He did come back onto the ground, so whether or not that's a sign that actually he's okay, or if it was a case of the fact that he was warm meant that the injury didn't hurt as much as it might have after the game, I'm not too sure. We saw Luke Parker lay a really big smother in this quarter, saves a goal, another massive moment from him to go with that kick in the third quarter. I thought was one of those games where you look at him and you go, he is standing up and he's doing everything he can. Didn't have big numbers in the game, Luke Parker, but certainly had an impact when he could. And just, the ball again, after that early burst from us, just lived in the Saints' half. We did get a foray on the counter, but we'd missed the kick inside. We missed Hanson Jr. Again, it wasn't a butchering, but we didn't put it enough to his advantage. And again, we'd turn it over and the Saints would slingshot straight back into their half. And unfortunately, that's kind of how the game went. We would, every now and then, we'd get a counter-attack, we'd transition it, we'd score. But for the most part, we weren't able to get enough of those transitions the full length of the field, and the Saints would just keep launching it back inside 50. The ball did get us within a kick with 2 minutes left. It was a nice transition coming from the Saints' back half, and the Saints kind of dropped back too far. They allowed us to get up the field, and unfortunately for them, the ball was able to kick a goal and give us a sniff with 2 minutes to go or a minute and a half to go. Had a couple of entries that went inside 50 and it looked like we'd gotten out the back or we had some space, but we just weren't quite clean enough. The ball didn't quite bounce our way and we weren't able to kick a goal, and then it did end up going towards the Saints goals with a couple of seconds left. And like I mentioned, McKercher gave away a free kick for a push in the back. It's one of those ones where the Saints player is going to kick it and McKercher just kind of gave him a bit of a shove. That sort of one it's rarely paid. I think it should be paid for what it's worth, but it's very rarely paid. So a bit frustrating that it was paid. I think we gave away a 50 then for dissent, but at that point the game was over. The siren was kind of going as that 50-minute penalty was paid. So not too concerned with the 50, but the free kick is more just annoying for consistency. Didn't cost us the game in any way, that particular decision, because the ball was up the Saints' end with about 3 seconds left. But yeah, I'd just like to see some consistency with those kind of calls. In any case, it's a 9-point loss for us, 78-69, and we just weren't quite able to get across the line. It was a nice, strong finish. We were able to kick some goals in the last quarter to get some momentum, but the Saints just that little bit better than us. And I think looking at the game, Wangan and Miller, whilst he didn't have the impact that he did last week, still a big game from him and still an impactful game and still a situation where you look at him, he's their best player. And the Saints do such a good job of getting him the footy and finding him in dangerous spots. He does have that flexibility that he can play through the middle, he can play off half-back, he can go forward, he can play on the wing. He's a totally flexible player. Really the only spot that you can't play him is in the ruck. Besides that, he can play anywhere, but I think the Saints do a much better job than we do of getting the ball into his hands than, say, we do with someone like Harry Sheezel or someone like McKercher who, they're finding the footy but in less dangerous spots, or they're having to win their own footy. Certainly Sheezel wins a lot more of his footy than Colby McKercher does. But I think that's a big part of the difference in this game. There's us turning it over a lot, but I think the way that the Saints are able to get it in his grasps is also super important. That's something we could definitely learn from in terms of getting the ball into our most dangerous players' hands more often. Any case, I think I've said it about 7 times this episode. Sorry, it's just one of those lines that I've got in my head at the moment. 9-point losers, a better performance than last week, which would not be hard, but ultimately did not get the chocolates, which is disappointing because this was definitely a winnable game for us. Story of the game, and I think definitely a different profile of game compared to what we've seen recently. I mentioned that we were trying to play a really uncontested game, and that was definitely the case. We did a good job of that in the first quarter, but the Saints, I think, sort of shut down our capacity in that area a little bit as the game went on, and we had to play a bit more fast-paced, more contested footy to compete. The Saints definitely beat us when it was in tight and contested. They won contested possessions 129 to 102, so pretty much a belting in that stat. If you're plus or minus 10, that's a pretty significant difference in the contested possessions battle. So they definitely beat us in tight, and that's what allowed them to win the territory battle and lock it inside their forward 50. And we weren't able to, I guess, put on the scoreboard for long enough periods of time. We had those moments of momentum, but certainly that the Saints had far more periods of momentum than we did. When we were able to get the game in that uncontested style and get the ball loose to our wingmen and our players on the fringes, I guess, I thought we actually looked pretty good. We had 62 more uncontested possessions. We had 42 marks. And when we were entering 50, whilst some of our entries were really poor, we still had a better inside 50 efficiency than the Saints, which is very rare. 53% for us, 46% for them. So that's a pretty significant improvement or betterment than them. And I guess speaks to the fact that they did have far more inside 50s than we did. That we lost that count 54 to 38. So they got the ball in. They weren't able to score. We just weren't able to get the ball inside 50 enough, because when we did, particularly if it was a good kick, we were actually able to do a pretty good job of converting that to scores. So I think it's a game where the availability or unavailability of Sherry was super important. He's a massive player for us at the contest. He's a big contested possession winner, and he's obviously also a massive player in the ruck. Bryn Teakle and Jack Darling can only do so much. I thought Teakle battled away. Similar to the last couple of weeks, he's been serviceable. This is why you have a player like him on the list in case you need to use him in situations such as this. I thought he was serviceable, but certainly wasn't able to bring what Tristan Sherry would be able to bring in the same role. There's not really any comparison there, and that makes total sense. Unfortunately, we don't have Sherry available. We didn't have him available, and next week we will. That's another game where, unfortunately, through that lack of availability, we haven't been able to compete. So we'll get him back next week. We'll be able to generate more of those opportunities in the contest, one would hope. But this is another one that just got away from us. But I do think it's worth talking about the fact that the profile of game is different. We've seen this a couple of times this year where we try to play this uncontested, keepings off kind of football. And, it does work for us in patches. Unfortunately, I just think good teams then adjust. And the Saints aren't even really a good football team in the scheme of things. They're well coached. I think Ross Lyon is a good coach. But in terms of their list, I think they're in a really interesting spot because they have a lot of young players like we do, but they probably have more of those middle-aged / mature-age players than we do. So they're in a bit of a weird spot with their list build, certainly in a better place than us in terms of their on-field performance, which is not hard. But by the same token, I think there's a very real chance that we go past them before they're able to come good. So, all of that is to say that they did adapt to the way that we were playing in that first quarter and were able to stifle it and make sure that we had to be more aggressive and more risk-taking with our kicks, which is what led to a lot of those turnovers. That the fact that we didn't have to bite off risky kicks so much in the first quarter allowed us to take it down the field and just find those options and find Nick Larkey free inside 50 or find Dylan Stevens on the wing, virtually free. So I think it's interesting that we keep going back to this style of play. I don't know that it suits us long term in terms of winning games because I think it's just so easy to then go one-on-one for opposition teams and defend it. But you've got to try different things, and I think I respect the fact that we're trying different things, particularly in this period of experimentation for us as a club. So nice to see that we haven't gone completely away from it. Nice to see that it was able to have some impact, but long term, I don't think that's the style that's going to be the blueprint for us going forward. Shinboner of the Week time and North Podium voting. Zach Banch is Shinboner of the Week. that huge mark going back with the flight, nearly collided in a serious way with Burns. Just that courage bordering on the lack of awareness for self almost, like a little bit dangerous, but so strong. Had shades, I'm not going to say it's the same, but shades of that Nick Riewoldt running back with the flight from all those years ago, playing for the Saints, but not quite to the same level. But he just had no thought. He just ran back with the flight, had eyes only for the footy and took a really nice mark. And I think that's the kind of thing that he's going to have to do if he wants to win a spot permanently in this side. He's going to have to show some special things. He needs to kick a goal. Unfortunately, he had a chance or a shot on goal in this game, but wasn't able to clinch it. He's now played, I guess, the best part of 3 games. He did start as sub in that first one, but came on pretty early. Hasn't been able to kick a goal yet. I think it's important that our small forwards do kick goals. Constantine's not a big goal kicker. Cooper Harvey has been able to hit the scoreboard, but Zach Banch with his 3 games, not yet. But I think for him, a special moment. I thought this was probably his best showing on the field as well so far. Nothing major. 6 disposals, 3 marks, 1 contested, had a tackle. Just a 34% game time, though. He was unfortunately subbed out with a rib injury. Apparently, it wasn't from that incident. It was from a different one. So I'm not sure what the contest was, which meant that he had the rib complaint. But a really nice moment for him. It might be the highlight of his career if he's not able to stick to stick a spot on the list, but it could be the start of something for him. And I certainly think that we're all hoping that's the case for him, because he looks like he really tries. He's got a good engine in him. I think last week it was really rough on him against Geelong because we just kept putting it on his head. This was, like I said, a better showing for him. Nothing a major, like he's not in the votes, so I'm not saying that it was a good game by a regular player's measurement, but I think the fact that he was able to have that really important mark and the fact that he was able to contribute significantly, not significantly, but he was able to contribute on the field, I think is a plus. So he is Shinboner of the week. In terms of the voting, obviously, again, no one with the 4 votes. It's been pretty few and far between for the 4 voters for this year. But I think Harry Sheezel's game is deserving of a 3. 33 disposals, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 3 inside 50s, kicked the goal like I mentioned. And I think, when the game was competitive in that first half, when we were playing really well, he was finding plenty of the footy and doing some damage with it. He was winning his own footy. He was finding on the outside. I think this was one of his better games in quite a while for the Shees. So definitely worth the 3 votes. I did consider another player for also getting the 3 votes, but I think Shees plays such an important role as that midfielder who can go forward, who can also go behind the footy. He is really what Nasiah Wangan and Miller are. They're very similar types of players for both sides. Wangan and Miller is definitely having a better year, and his game last week was special. But I think they represent the same for both sides. They're really young, they're super, super talented, and the more they can get their hands in the footy, the more damaging they can be. So I thought Sheezel was our best on the field. I think if you're looking at best on ground, he might have been 2nd or 3rd best on ground. I think Wangan and Miller would certainly be up there for best on ground. But Sheezer's 33 touches was worth the 3 votes for me. I very nearly gave Colby McKercher the 3 votes as well. I've dropped him down to 2. I just thought he had a really important turnover go against him. I know it's just one moment, but I think that kind of is the difference between a 3 and a 2. He played a really good game, but had a couple of errors, McKercher, that just moved him back slightly. So 36 disposals, 8 marks, a goal assist, 3 inside 50s, kicked a goal himself, 640 metres gained. Definitely one of his better games recently. I think he's been on a real hot streak, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later on. But like I mentioned, just a mistake or two cost him the 3 votes, but I thought his ability to get the ball in transition and move the ball was really good. I didn't see him wasting too many of his disposals. He'd chain up and the ball would still be moving forward. I don't love the sideways kicks and hand passes that can sometimes happen for a player like him. It's different if Toby Pink's kicking it sideways to get to McKercher, but I'd prefer to see McKercher moving the ball forward, and I think he did that most of the time, and pretty confidently that can be said. Sure, he missed a kick or 2, but holistically speaking, I thought he fulfilled that role really well. And I mentioned Caleb Daniel throughout the game review. I thought similarly he transitioned the ball really well. So he's also getting the 2 votes, 32 disposals, 8 marks, a goal assist, went at 91% disposal effectiveness, which I guess speaks to the fact that he did look after the footy, he didn't waste it, and I thought his role was super important with McKercher. Given the amount of time the ball spent in our defensive half, Those two did their absolute best to get it out. I don't think our ability to transition, or our lack of ability thereafter, was due to them. I think it was more what was happening up the field. We weren't able to create space, and the Saints did a really good job of clogging up those empty spaces. So I thought McKercher and Daniel, this was probably the best game that the two of them collectively have played, and I thought deserving of the 2 votes. And then I'll go through the 1 voters quickly. Tommy Powell, 24 disposals, 6 marks, 5 tackles, 3 clearances, a goal assist, 8 score involvements, which was a team-leading amount. I thought played his role in the midfield. Didn't do anything special, but did enough. It had one really nice kick inside 50, but beyond that, I think this was a pretty standard midfielders game. So played his role, gets the 1 vote. Same for LDU, 21 touches, a goal, 6 marks, 5 tackles, 4 clearances, 3 goal assists. I thought, again, like Powell, played his role. Didn't do too much that was flashy. The 3 goal assists really helps. And he did have a couple of really big, important clearances, but not one of his better games, I would say. Just a game where he played his role. And the sort of game where you look at Wanganeen-Miller, I know I've spoken about him a lot, but his impact was certainly greater than LDU's in this game. And they're the two, I guess, who are going to be big money players for either side if Nas does decide to re-sign. Jack Darling, 14 disposals, a goal, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, 2 goal assists. I thought played his role, was a bit more flexible this time, did play the deepest forward and played the marking target up the ground. I thought did a great job in that, so structurally played his role, worth a vote. Dylan Stephens, 20 touches and 6 marks. I mentioned him. Pretty prolific on the wing. I thought this was one of those games where he played the role of a wingman really well, worthy of 1 vote. Cam Zerha, 10 disposals, 2 goals, 3, 8 marks, 1 of those contested. Just a really good option. The ball didn't necessarily get to him as often as we would have liked, but I think when you kick 2 goals, 3 and you've got 8 marks in the forward line, generally you're probably doing your job. Luke Parker, really, to be honest, gets the 1 vote based on those 2 big moments, the smother and that really nice kick to get us going in the third quarter. 17 disposals, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances. Like I said, not a big numbers game for him, but I thought his impact when he did get around it was really important. And finally, Nick Larkey, a strange one. 7 disposals, 8 marks. It's pretty rare that someone has more marks than disposals, but because he took that mark and then had to go off and wasn't able to take his kick, he actually cost himself a disposal there. So 7 disposals, 3 goals, 8 marks. Again, sort of kind of similar to Zerha and Darling. As a key forward, I think he's played his role. He hasn't been able to do much more than play his role, but I think particularly returning from injury, this was a game where he did what he had to do. So reviewing that, Harry Sheezel 3, Colby McKercher and Cab Daniel 2, and then the 1 voters, Powell, LDU, Darling, Stephens, Zerha, Larkey and Parker. In terms of the North Podium standings now with 3 games to go, it looks like this. Harry Sheezel 23 votes, Tristan Sherry 20 votes, LDU and Luke Parker tied for 3rd on 18 votes. Colby McKercher into outright, I guess, 4th or 5th, depending on how you look at it. He's on 16. Curtis, Powell and Zerha on 14. So they're probably the ones that are in with a chance of finishing on the podium or on the top of the podium. Obviously, Sheezel's 3 votes takes him 3 votes clear, but Tristan Sherry is going to come back next week and give him a run for his money. So that is what it looks like. 3 games to go. That's heating up. It's about the only thing that's heating up for North Melbourne at the moment because our score lines are not. But really pleasing, I guess, that we've got some high-end talent getting some votes from me. That's the bar at the moment for North Melbourne because there's not a lot else going for us. Thank you so much to everyone for their support throughout the season. We are nearly at the end of the season, and I just want to appreciate everyone for listening and supporting the show. If you can, share the show out with any other North Melbourne fans that are in your periphery, that would be much appreciated. Subscribe to your chosen podcast service, and you can get involved with the show on my social media accounts at NorthPod Show. I would like to thank Rousseau for the 10 coffees he provided during the week, or the 10 Cokes, as it were, for me. Really appreciate it. He's been a long-time listener and member of the North Pod and North Melbourne community. So thank you so much. If you would like to get a shout-out, you can support me at my Buy Me a Coffee link, which you can find in the show notes. All right, Kanga clipboard time, and we've got a few things that I kind of breezed over during the review. I think the day that one of these talking points isn't costly turnovers is when we'll know that things have started to turn around for us. Unfortunately, and put too simply, we just have too many players that miss too many handballs, too many kicks. That just means that we're not giving our forwards enough of a chance. And generally, we're just really poor decision makers when we're going forward with the ball. Now, I think something that is interesting, or it interests me at least, sometimes because most of the time I'm watching North Melbourne games, and I, to be honest, don't get a lot of time to watch just a neutral game these days. My 8-month-old keeps me pretty busy. I might watch a quarter or two of a Friday night game, but by and large, I'm watching the North game, and I might watch some highlights and some stuff from the other games. I don't get to watch a lot of it, but every now and then I will watch one, and it's only then do you notice just how different the way that we move the ball is to other teams, and how clinical other teams are. I think you can get a bit of, I guess, blinded by the fact that all we see is North Melbourne and teams torching us. If you don't get some context for what else is happening in the league, I think it can feel, just a little bit out of whack. But watching other teams, you realise just how bad we are at closing in or closing off those opportunities where you get like maybe a 4-on-3 at the back. Every other team's able to make that work and kick the goal. We always find ways to just miss a kick or just miss a hand pass, and that allows the opposition to lay a tackle and stop the play, and all of a sudden it's a stoppage and that opportunity's gone. So many opportunities like that. That's putting aside, of course, the times that we just turn it over at half-back and give the opposition a perfect opportunity to kick to an unmanned player inside 50 and concede an easy goal. Like that's us 2 or 3 times a week. And then, of course, we're missing those opportunities going up the other end. It's just, that's where we're at, unfortunately. Whilst the Saints were inaccurate in front of goal, it was our skills up the ground that made a major difference. That they weren't able to finish their work in front of goal. We weren't able to get the ball from one end to the other without turning it over. No one was immune to that. Like I said, McKercher was brilliant, but he skewed 1 or 2. Caleb Daniel, I think, was a little bit more different. He didn't really skew them, but at times looked indecisive because we just weren't providing any movement. All we were giving him was that long kick down the line, which I don't think he wants to take. I think it's pretty clear from the instruction from the coaches is that's got to be a last option. If you can find a sideways kick for 20 metres that maybe gets us 5 metres forward, take that option over going the long down the line. And part of that's because we just don't have great tall contested markers. Like Nick Larkey is not a contested mark, he's a leading mark. Tristan Sherry is not on the side, but certainly he's not someone that's prolific at taking marks like that. Jack Darling can, but I think he's better more in a one-on-one. We just don't have those players that, we don't have a Max Gawn that down the line can take the mark, or a Sam Darcy down the line, or an Aaron Norton. We don't have that player down the line to take the mark. We can create a contest, and generally we do, but even then our crumbing at ground level is also not fantastic. So unfortunately what that means is we've got to find ways to move the footy without bombing it down the line, and I think that's positive for our development. I think long term that's what we want to be doing. Unfortunately, we just need to be able to find options and create space better than we're able to at the moment. So that's why that transition looks so poor. I think I mentioned the way that Chom tried to defend in that first quarter. Our defenders simply have to know the rules about running back with the flight. I don't understand players that don't watch football. You can see examples of this all the time. A bugbear of mine is when you get a free kick for either deliberate out of bounds or insufficient intent, or it's out in the full. Players don't seem to realise that once you step back into play, it's play on, and they're almost surprised and confused that the umpire calls them for play on when they do that. That's a bugbear. Another big bugbear of mine is that players haven't cottoned on to the fact that if you're running back with the flight, you just have to keep your eyes on the ball. You cannot look at your opponent to then engage them and then hope to turn your head at the last minute. You get a free kick paid against you every time. Just like if you're running back with the flight and you're facing backwards and you put your arm up to try and spoil it, and if you don't make contact with the footy and you do touch the opposition player, it's a free kick. And unfortunately, we just don't seem to either be aware of that, or we're unable to play that way. Chom's example is one of so many this year where we've given away free kicks needlessly because we just haven't turned our body to face the footy, or we've been so man-centric, that we want to put that contact on, you've got to feel for them with your arms. You can't use your head to swivel and find them because the umpire pings you every time. It's not, that Chom's example was one, and, I think he had a pretty good game after that, a solid game, but it's the sort of free kick that really saps life out of the game early. The fact that we only conceded one in the first quarter, it was from that, speaks to the fact that we were giving away we give away scores. It links back to my first point around the turnovers and the lack of capacity to transition the footy. We just give up so many easy scores. And it's no wonder that we're unable to win week in, week out, because we make it easy for the opposition to stay in games. So if you're listening, defenders, which I'm sure you would be listening to North Pod, you've got to find ways to adjust your body position. I know it's hard. Like, I'm saying this as someone over the fence, not out there. You've got to be really strong-willed to just go back with the flight. But if you're not able to go back with the flight and have your eyes on the footy, you've got to, I guess, accept the fact that you can't make contact, and you've just got to hope that someone else is coming in to support you and you can be the crummer at the front of the contest. But at the moment, we give up too many free kicks for making that kind of contact. Speaking of free kicks, Paul Curtis really needs to pull his finger out. I love Paul Curtis as a player. The way that he started the year was absolutely sensational. He got, I think, a little bit slowed down by his unfortunate suspension earlier in the year, but he's been offered a week for his striking at the end of the first quarter. I'd be surprised if he doesn't have to serve that. I think we're going to be missing him for the game against the Giants. And unfortunately, it's just a pattern for him where he can get sucked into wrestling and fighting and giving it back to the opposition players. It's costly. He gave away a reversal free kick. He has to find a way to toe the line and only play aggressive, but up to the spot where he's not going to give away free kicks. Last year, I believe he was the player on the side that gave away the most free kicks for us. If he wasn't, he was very close to it. I think this year he's been better at finding a way to control his temperament and not give away silly free kicks all the time. But unfortunately, this was a game where the Saints really got inside his head, and he's got to find a way to channel that. I do wonder if the coaching group needs to speak to him more throughout the game and just give him a spell or get the runner out to him and tell him to calm down. That generally doesn't help, but I do think coming off the ground would have helped, because there was a couple of other moments where he just looked like he wanted to wrestle rather than get on with the game. And when that's happening, you know that a player's mind's probably not on the footy. It didn't look like Paul Curtis was thinking about the footy at various times in this game. And I think, again, the Saints played him perfectly. This is the way to play him, is annoy him, get him thinking about other stuff. And Paul Curtis didn't kick a goal for the game, and I think that speaks to the fact that he was in this battle with himself in his mind. So there's some negatives. I think, speaking to positive, Colby McKercher's year has been really promising. And despite the team's drop-off, he's had a really good second half of the year. I mentioned him in the North Podium voting. He's up to 16 votes total for the year. And since the bye, we've played 9 games now, and he's polled votes from me in 8 of those games. Now, of course, I'm just me. I'm just the North Podium or the North Pod host. I'm not a complete expert, but I think it does speak to the fact that since the bye, he's been playing really consistent footy. He's been finding the footy, and he hasn't been butchering it as much as he did in the first part of the year. I think it's really promising. We need a player like him. He's a high draft pick. We need these high draft picks to be hits. It looks as though we've had a couple of misses. Like Will Phil, I'd be surprised if he is on the list next year, which is a real shame. I think he has such a great character and had that potential to be a really good inside mid, but it just doesn't quite look like it's going to work for him. And Zane Dersmer is definitely a question mark at this point, but McKercher, you'd have to say, is a win to this point. Sure, he's playing a role which is really easy to find the football off halfback, but finding it and disposing of it accurately and doing some damage are two different things. So the fact that he's been able to go forward and kick a goal or two in these games, and like I said, transition the footy really cleanly for the most part, is really promising. I think we've got to celebrate the wins. I thought McKercher was, I thought last year in his first year he showed flashes, but this season he's been far more consistent and really been able to show his capacity off that halfback. I think he's going to be a really good winger for a long time for us. It remains to be seen if he could be an out-and-out midfielder. I just don't know that that's his skill set. He really isn't great defensively and in one-on-one bodyline contests, which I think as a mid you've kind of got to be able to do that. But if you look at what Bailey Scott's done for us over the past few years, I definitely think McKercher can replace that and some, because McKercher was a much better kick than Bailey Scott ever was. We know that defensively he's not going to be elite, but if he is that designated kicker and he can get forward and kick the occasional goal like he's been doing, that's the kind of player that we were hoping for high up in the draft. And I think, to this point, nearly at the end of his second year, I definitely think we've got that. So that's really promising. I think, like I said, we've got to celebrate wins like that, because the positives can be a bit few and far between for us. And final point on the clipboard here, just thinking ahead to next year in terms of the players that we're not too sure about their spot in the side or how we're going to use them. Cooper Harvey didn't have his best game. Wasn't able to hit the scoreboard in this one, but we saw him go behind the footy and play off half-back late in the game, and I do think he was able to have an impact in that role. He did get a couple of drives kicking it forward, so I think it's interesting that we've got a couple of different roles that he can play in. He's definitely been able to kick goals for us, which is promising, so I think he's done himself no harm of potentially getting another contract for next year. Zane Dersma took a nice contested mark, but other than that, struggled to find the footy off half-back. Again, not really a game that you'd look at and go, great, I know exactly what we're going to get from him next year. He's an interesting one because he is contracted for next year, so he'll definitely be on the list unless we decide to, or he asks for a trade, whereas Cooper Harvey is not guaranteed to be on an AFL list next year. I hope that we keep playing Dersma, because I think we really need to see what he's got in these last 3 games. If Paul Curtis is out, that probably gives Zane Dersma a chance to stay in the side. But even then, he's playing at half-back mostly at the moment, which is not the role that he was drafted for. Wardlaw is the one that I want to talk about. I'm just a bit concerned now about the way that he is showing up at the moment. Obviously had the concussion. He's played 2 games through the VFL to try and build some confidence and build some touch. And I just thought his cleanliness in the first half was not there. He looked unable to make use of that ball-winning physicality. He was throwing his body around it. He was making an impact, but he wasn't able or clean enough to pick it up. He wasn't able to, I guess, really impact the score or the contest that he was at. He was impacting them in that his body was there and the ball was moving around, but he wasn't able to pick it up and fish it out to someone else. So, look, I wonder if it's time to wrap him up in cotton wool for the year and look to build him for next year. I'm sure he would want to do that. I'm sure he wants to play footy given he's missed so much. And I understand that, but he's had a lot of concussions. I would hate to see him get another one. And I just don't know that he's perfectly primed to be playing AFL football at the moment. Anyway, I'm sure the coaching group and those around him would know far better than me, and I'm just looking at him from the outside, but he just didn't look quite himself in this game. Maybe he just needed this one to find his feet again, and he's going to have a good 3 weeks, but when I think about the way that he started the year, when he came into the side early on, he was fantastic. We haven't really seen that from him since then. And I can't help but wonder if that's the accumulation of the concussions and his inability to stay on the park. He's a really important piece for us, and at the moment, he's just not quite living up to that, and that's for various reasons. Part of that is definitely the injuries, but part of that is, his kicking really hurts us at times, and if he's not winning it 25 to 30 times in close, then he's got to be doing a little bit more on the outside. So I'm not writing him off by any stretch. I love Wardlaw. I think he plays with a lot of heart, and he's certainly a player that you love to have on your team. I'm just a bit concerned by his development this year, I guess. This is year 3 for him. And I think this was a year where we want to see him take a step forward in his consistency, and we just haven't quite seen that. So I guess this is where you start to go. Sure, we have a lot of young draft picks, high draft picks in our side, but unless we start to see the development and the growth in them, that's where we're going to stagnate. Harry Sheezel's another good example of that. He's having a good year, but by his standards, he's not playing as well as he did in year 1 or year 2. And I guess that's the thing. He should be playing at least that well. I understand that opposition teams would be putting more time into him than he has been, and he's not playing that halfback role that he did for a lot of those previous 2 years, but you would expect to see some development. And, I think we haven't seen development in Sheezel much this year. We haven't seen development and consistency for Wardlaw. Dersma's gone backwards this year. This is the concern, I think, with the development at the club. we're seeing little glimpses of improvement across the side, but holistically and team-wide developmentally, like, is it there, and is this the group to take us up the ladder? Like, we're all hoping it is, we're all wanting it to be, but at some point the penny's going to have to drop, and it just doesn't look like it's about to, unfortunately. Finally, around Arden Street, the VFL was unfortunately a loss. We lost to Sandringham 129-106. And my understanding is that rules us out of the finals prospects for the VFL. There's only 2 games left for the VFL. Their season's always running a week earlier than the AFL, if that makes sense. So my understanding is we're out of contention now. Geordie Payne kicked 6 goals. I think he'll definitely play before the year is up. He was named as an emergency for this game. Given I think he's now kicked 10 goals from his last 2 games, I think it's worth getting him in. We're going to have to decide if we recontract him as well. So whilst it's another small forward, maybe a Zach Banch could come out. Potentially he just replaces Paul Curtis if Paul Curtis is going to be out for a week. I think it's time to get Geordie Payne in. I'm probably late to that bandwagon. There's been some that have been calling for him to come into the side for a long time. Even Jacob Constanti, to be honest. I know he does a lot of unrewarded stuff that you don't necessarily notice, but I do think he has dropped off the last month or so and hasn't been able to contribute really as much as he had been. So look, I think it's time to give Geordie Payne a go, just so we know a little bit about what we've got before we have to make a list decision on him. In terms of others, like Willfield had 20 disposals and 5 clearances. Whitlock kicked 2 goals, but I don't think there was too much else out of that VFL performance that you'd look at and go, all right, those players, they're definitely knocking down the door for selection. And then no other news, so we'll look quickly across to the game against the Giants next week. It is a 1:40 game on Sunday. That must be the 10th of August, I think, in Canberra. So, it's our old stomping ground from many, many years ago, but certainly the Giants have made it their stomping ground more recently. I think it's a danger game for us because the Giants really need to win. They're currently sitting, I believe, in 8th position. Might be slightly higher than that potentially, but they're at the bottom part of the 8 and they need to win to keep themselves above the Western Bulldogs. There's a lot in it for them. There's not a lot in it for us other than the fact that we just need to keep competing. Games against top 8 sides like this are not necessarily ones that we want to focus on winning, but we want to compete. So it's going to be a tough one for us, I think. It has the potential to be very similar to the Geelong game where we sort of stick around for a quarter or so and then get blown out. I hope I'm wrong, but there's just a lot of things that are tailing off and not working so well for us in the last part of this season. So I don't have a great feeling about it. Tristan Sherry coming back is definitely a positive, but most likely losing Paul Curtis is a negative there. I would expect and hope that we get Jai Simpkin back. Hopefully Nick Larkey's knee is okay. There's a lot of hopes and maybes and we're waiting ons for a side that's sitting 17th at the moment, but yeah, I just think we need as many of our good players on the park as we can. And Sherry definitely will make a big difference to our midfield group. We can't give up on the season yet. It sounds like we're hoping for finals. That's not what I mean. But, we've got the Richmond Tigers the week after this, which is a must-win game from the perspective of, saving some face, to be honest. And then we've got the Crows in the last round, which does not bode well for us given how well they're playing at the moment. So I think we need to keep our chin up now. We need to compete against the Giants so that we can go into the Richmond game with some confidence. But I can understand where the players are at now. Like mentally, you've got 3 weeks to go. It's going to be another long off season. There definitely would be players that are starting to tune out, unfortunately. It's just human nature. Hopefully there's enough leadership there. The likes of Luke Parker is a super competitive player. I hope that he keeps us on the straight and narrow, and we can hopefully play some good footy against the Giants next week. I will wish you a good week. Hope it's a good one. Sorry it's been a bit late for me to get the pod out. Life as a father is still providing me with plenty of challenges. Like I said, have a fantastic week, and I'll speak to you sometime after the Giants game. We are nearly there. We're nearly at the end of the season. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.